All right, so, when you start thinking about doing a master's degree overseas, places like the US or the UK, those kind of come to mind first, right?
Yeah, for sure.
But, something really interesting is that there are tons of international students, like over 85,000, who are actually studying in Poland.
Wow. Yeah, that's a big number.
It is a huge number. And, for anyone out there who's thinking about like a really affordable but high quality master science degree,
Mm-hmm.
maybe in Europe, Poland is a place you really should be looking at.
Absolutely. It's kind of like a hidden gem.
Yeah,
People haven't really discovered it yet.
exactly. And that's why we are doing this deep dive today to really get into, why is Poland becoming such a popular choice for students? We've
Yeah.
got a ton of research here, articles talking about all the pros and cons and tips for applying, and we've got expert insights from educational consultants, some really interesting stats, and even real student experiences so we can
Yeah.
give you like the complete picture.
Yeah, that's great.
So, let's jump right in.
Yeah, let's do it.
What do you think is like the biggest appeal of Poland when it comes to, choosing it for your master's?
I think the biggest appeal is that it offers a really good combination of affordability
Hmm.
and quality,
Right.
and especially when you compare the tuition fees. It's a huge difference, compared to Western Europe or the US.
Yeah.
We're talking about roughly 2,000 to 6,000 euros per year.
Which is a big factor, I think, for a lot of
Mhm.
students who are, thinking about, okay, where can I actually afford to study?
Exactly.
But, the important thing is that it doesn't mean lower quality
Exactly.
just because it's more affordable.
That's right. And in fact, over 20 Polish universities are actually included in the QS World University rankings.
Wow.
So that really shows you that you're getting a quality education.
Yeah, absolutely. And, maybe we can even highlight a few of these top institutions and what programs they're known for.
Yeah, sure. So one example is the University of Warsaw. Um, they have a really strong reputation, especially in computer science,
Yeah.
business analytics, engineering, and just general business analytics.
It's great.
Yeah, and they also have some really cool partnerships with local tech companies, which gives their students, really good real-world project experience.
That's awesome.
Yeah, and then another one, you have the Jagiellonian University.
Oh, yeah, I've heard of
Yeah,
that.
it's one of the oldest and most respected universities in Poland.
Wow.
And they're really strong in fields like biotechnology, data science, and physics.
Okay.
And they've just got this long tradition of, academic excellence.
And then there's also the Warsaw University of Technology, right?
Yeah, that's right.
Which is really, really big for all those IT and engineering programs.
Yeah, it's kind of a hub for that.
Yeah, especially if you're thinking about going into programming.
Absolutely. And they often have, these close ties with industry, which can open doors for research and even future employment.
That's fantastic. And what about AGH University of Science and Technology?
Yeah, that's another really key player. And they're really well known for their programs in mechanical engineering, artificial intelligence, and environmental science.
Oh, interesting.
And they even facilitate internships with leading tech businesses, which is just an awesome opportunity to get some practical skills.
Absolutely.
And then lastly, we have the Wrocław University of Science and Technology.
Okay.
And this one's really worth noting because they have a really high graduate employment rate.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So their master's programs in cybersecurity, robotics, and chemical engineering,
Yeah.
they really seem to do a good job of preparing their students for jobs.
That's great. And, I think for a lot of people who are considering studying, in a country where English isn't the first language, they might be a little worried about the whole language barrier thing.
Right. Yeah, of course.
But it seems like Poland has kind of adapted to that, hasn't it?
Yeah, they have a ton of Polish universities are offering their master's programs entirely in English now,
That's good.
which is, it's a big advantage for international students.
It really is. And, when we talk about finances, it's not just about the tuition fees, right?
No, definitely not.
There's also the whole cost of living and all of that.
Right.
And I think it's helpful for students to know that there are actually ways to get financial aid and scholarships in Poland.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's actually quite a few options. So you have the government-backed options like the Navioi Awards, which is the Polish National Agency for Academic Exchange Scholarships.
Right.
These can be pretty competitive, though,
I see.
so it's good to start looking into them early on.
Yeah.
And then you also have the Erasmus Plus scholarships, which a lot of people have heard of,
Yes.
and those often support, studying abroad
Yeah.
within Europe.
Mm-hmm.
And then you also have a lot of individual universities who offer their own scholarships,
Oh, okay.
specifically for international students. So it's definitely worth, researching those early on in the application process to see if you're eligible and what they cover.
Okay. That's really good to know. And, when you compare it to other countries in Europe, Poland seems to be quite affordable when it comes to living expenses as well, right?
Yeah, it is. On average, you might be looking at around 400 to 800 euros per month
Okay.
for, all your expenses like your food, your accommodation, transport, and just other necessities.
Yeah,
So it's definitely more cost effective, which can be a big help when you're studying abroad.
absolutely. All right. So, we've talked about, how affordable it is and the quality of education.
Yeah.
But what about like the actual practical steps of like applying and getting there?
Right.
What do students need to know?
So generally speaking, the first thing you need is a bachelor's degree
Okay.
in a relevant field to the master's program that you want to study.
Right.
And if the program is taught in English, then you'll need to prove your English proficiency. And that's usually done through like an IELTS score around 6 to 6.5 or a TOEFL score of 80 to 90. Yeah. And then you also need to prepare other documents as well, like a statement of purpose,
Yes.
outlining your goals and what you want to do in your career, and then a couple of letters of recommendation
Right.
from professors or employers,
Mm-hmm.
people who know your work well,
Yeah.
and then of course a CV or resume showcasing all of your academic and professional history.
So once you have all of those documents, what do you actually do?
So the application process itself usually starts with researching and selecting the program and the university that you want to apply to,
Yeah.
and then you really want to check their specific requirements because it
Right.
does vary.
Okay.
So you want to gather all your documents, and then most universities have these online application portals where you just submit everything there.
Okay.
And then if you're accepted, you'll get an official acceptance letter,
Right.
which you'll need for the next step,
Okay. And that is?
applying for your visa.
Ah, okay. So what kind of visa do you need?
You need a Polish national visa, specifically the Type D visa, which is for, long-term stays, like for studying.
Mm-hmm. And what are some of the documents that you would need to provide for that?
So you'll need your passport.
Yeah.
That's valid, of course.
Great.
You'll need the official university acceptance letter,
Mm-hmm.
proof that you have enough money to cover your expenses.
Yeah.
So that could be bank statements or sponsorship letters.
Got it.
And you need health insurance, which is mandatory.
Okay.
And then the visa application form itself. And often they'll ask for a copy of your flight booking as well.
Okay.
So it's really important to start this process early because it can take a while.
That's a good tip. Yeah. All right. So let's say you've completed your master's.
Yeah.
What does the job market look like in Poland for international graduates?
It's a good question. And I think it's really encouraging because it seems to be quite strong,
Oh, that's great.
especially in sectors like engineering, IT, finance, and healthcare.
Wow.
And you have all these major international companies there, like Google Poland, IBM, Capgemini, Samsung, R&D, Microsoft.
Wow.
They all have a big presence there.
That's awesome.
So they're all potential employers.
So you're telling me there's a good chance of actually finding a job in Poland after I graduate?
Yeah, definitely. And another good thing is that they have these post-study work opportunities.
Hmm.
So after you finish your master's, you can actually apply for a temporary residency permit.
Okay.
And that allows you to stay and work in Poland for up to 2 years.
Wow.
So it gives you a chance to get some, international work experience.
That's fantastic. But, we would be remiss if we didn't talk about the challenges of studying abroad.
Right.
What are some of the things that students might, come up against while they're studying in Poland?
So yeah, of course there are going to be some challenges.
Yeah.
So even though a lot of programs are in English, just navigating everyday life,
Right.
Things like shopping or, dealing with, local authorities,
Mm-hmm.
there can still be a bit of a language barrier.
Yeah.
And then, of course, the visa and documentation processes can be a little complex.
Yeah, I can imagine.
Managing your budget and the cost of living is something
Yeah.
you always have to think about.
Absolutely.
And then also adapting to the climate in Poland,
Right.
especially the colder months, that can be a bit of an adjustment.
Yeah.
And then, there's always the pressure of, being in a new academic environment,
Yeah.
the educational differences and, feeling homesick and all that.
Those are all really important points. But, it sounds like there are ways to kind of manage those challenges.
Yeah, definitely.
Right.
So learning some basic Polish phrases, I think, can really help you out.
That's a good idea.
Yeah, just with your day-to-day life and starting the visa process early. And,
Yes.
And, being organized with all your paperwork is really key.
Absolutely.
Creating a budget and looking at different housing options like student dorms,
Mm-hmm.
which are usually the most affordable.
Yeah.
Those can really help manage your finances. And, packing for the climate is
Yeah.
also important.
Right. Bring a warm coat.
Yeah, exactly. And I think engaging with student support services
Mm-hmm.
and connecting with other international students or expat communities can really help with, the academic stress
Yeah.
and just feeling homesick and stuff like that.
Yeah, those are all really good tips.
Yeah,
I think it's always helpful to hear from people who have, that firsthand experience.
exactly.
So what did our sources say, from education consultants and current students?
So we learned a lot, actually.
Yeah.
We spoke to an education consultant, Rod Anna Kowalski,
Uh,
and she really emphasized the affordability and high standards of
Yeah.
Polish education,
Mhm.
especially in fields like technology and business.
That's great.
Yeah, and then we also heard from student influencers who,
Yeah.
talked about all the positives,
Yeah.
like the scholarships that are available, the welcoming visa policy,
That's good.
and they talked about the modern facilities on campus.
Yeah.
And I think one of the most impressive things is that over 90% of graduates from top Polish universities actually find jobs within 6 months.
Wow, 90%.
Yeah,
That's amazing.
it is. That really shows you that there are good career prospects there.
Absolutely. And, we also came across some fictional examples that really showed us like some potential success stories.
We did. Yeah, it's always good to see, how things could work out.
Yeah, and I think they were really interesting, so maybe we can talk about those.
Sure. So we have the story of Arav from India, who studied mechanical engineering at Warsaw University of Technology.
Okay.
And he was really happy with the affordability of the program. And, after he graduated, he actually found a really good job in Europe.
Wow, that's great.
And then we have Sinha from Bangalore,
Mhm.
who studied AI and data science at Poznan University.
Okay.
And she was really happy with the scholarships that she received and the fact that she could work part-time while she was studying.
Mm-hmm.
And then lastly, we have Raj from Hyderabad, who studied electronics at AGH University of Science and Technology. And he had a really smooth admission and visa process.
That's fantastic.
And he was just really happy with, the international exposure that he got.
Yeah, and the career prospects in Europe.
Yeah, exactly.
So if there's someone listening right now and they're thinking, okay, I'm seriously thinking about going to Poland to do my master's in 2025.
Mm-hmm.
What are like the top 3 things they need to take away from this conversation?
Okay, so I would say the first thing is to really do your research
Yeah,
and select the right university and program.
absolutely.
Look at the rankings, look at the curriculum,
Hmm.
see what the faculty is like, and make sure it's the right fit for you.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
make sure you understand the admissions requirements as well, right?
Yeah.
Because that can vary.
Yeah, so you'll need your bachelor's degree, your proof of English proficiency, your academic transcripts,
Yeah.
and then, depending on the program, you might need a portfolio or to take an entrance exam.
Okay, and I think the second thing is scholarships, right?
Yes, definitely prioritize those.
Yeah.
Look into them early. The NDOA scholarships, university-specific grants,
Mm-hmm.
those can make a big difference.
They really can. And third, I think just being realistic about your budget
Yeah.
and planning for those living costs. We said that average is about 400 to 800 euros a month.
Right. But it's always good to have, a bit extra just in case.
Yeah, absolutely. And don't forget to start that visa application early,
That's a very good point. Yeah.
the Type D visa.
Make sure you have all the documents.
Yeah.
And look into part-time work opportunities as well.
Okay.
Because you are allowed to work, up to 20 hours a week
While you're studying.
while you're studying and then full-time during the holidays.
Oh, that's good to know.
And I think finding affordable accommodation is also key.
Absolutely.
So student dorms are often the best option,
Yeah.
but you can also look at shared apartments.
Okay.
And learning some basic Polish can really help you out as well.
Yeah, it can't hurt, right?
Yeah, and it can even help you with networking
That's a good point.
and finding part-time work.
Mm-hmm. And of course, don't forget health insurance.
That's right, it's mandatory.
Yeah, absolutely mandatory. And remember that there are actually some pretty good post-study work opportunities in Poland.
There are.
So if you're thinking about staying there, after you graduate,
Yeah,
sectors like IT engineering and finance, those are really in demand.
exactly.
Okay, fantastic.
Yeah.
So I think it's pretty clear that, Poland has a lot to offer
It does.
when it comes to doing your master's degree. We're talking about affordability,
Yeah.
high quality education, a growing number of programs taught in English,
Mm-hmm.
good potential for scholarships, a promising job market, and a vibrant student life.
Yeah, it's really a great option.
So if you are, out there thinking about doing your master's and you
Mhm.
want to go to a dynamic European country, but you don't want to, spend a fortune,
Right?
Poland is definitely a really, really strong choice.
I think so. And it's becoming increasingly popular.
It is, and it's really interesting to see how, the whole landscape of international education is changing. I think
Yeah.
Poland is a great example of how, accessible and high quality education
Yeah.
is kind of moving beyond those traditional expensive countries.
It is.
So, maybe it's time for people to think a little outside the box
Yeah.
and really explore those opportunities
Absolutely.
and not just look at the usual suspects
Yeah.
when it comes to their academic journey.
I agree.
I think Poland is a great example of that.